How y'all doing today? My name is Brad Johnson Smith, and I was asked to be here by one of my colleagues. We teach yoga at the YMCA, Dr. Nelson Zane, and said he couldn't be here today. Had some work he had to do out of town, and so I told him I'd cover. He told me he's going to be teaching you some Bible. So I'm here to instruct you in the Old Testament. And specifically, we're going to be talking about exile, the time of exile. Do you know what exile means? Let me tell you what exile means. Imagine if you were, you went into town, you went to a local bar, maybe play a little pool or something, have a little brewski, and they said, the bartender, he was like, hey kid, you got an ID? And you were like, I forgot my ID, sir. Left it at home. And he said, out. You're out of here. Get on out of here. Don't come back without no ID. That's kind of like exile right there. Okay? Now, I'm not saying, God's a bartender or Israel's a bar, anything like that. But when you're taken out of the place that you want to be, that's exile. And God did that to his people. But he didn't do it like a bartender. Get on out of here. He gave them chances. And he gave them chances because he loved them. He loved his people. He wanted them to stay in the land that he gave to them. That was his land that he gave to them for their benefit and for his glory. But they didn't treat the land right. And they didn't treat each other right. And they didn't love God with all their heart, mind, and soul. And they didn't love their neighbor like they loved themselves. So God said, get on out of here. Out. But he was doing it to teach them a lesson. To teach them to love him with all their heart, mind, and soul. But also to love their neighbors as themselves. And that's something for us to learn by, because see, we're not so different. We're not so different than Israel, are we? Are we now? Be honest. Be honest, Jack. Be honest, Django. Be honest, Abel. We're not so different. So we're going to talk about that, and you're going to need to get out your sheet there. It should be in your internet thingy. And it's a sheet that looks like this. It says Casket Empty Exile. See the E over here is in a block, square. So get that one, pull it out. We're going to take some notes. So get your pen, pencils, whatever you got there. And we're going to cover this now. All right. First of all, the period of exile was a long time ago. It was between 586 and 639 BC. Now, or 689, I think it's can't really see through these glasses. I'm gonna take these off here so you can see me a little better. All right. Now, the period of exile. First, we should talk about the bad guys. Okay. Now, the bad guys, they were not worshiping God at all. They didn't care one lick about God. They had their own gods. And if you remember, in the king's period, the people of God were looking around at all the other people out there, and they was like, man, look at what they got. Look at what they do. Look at what they have going on, man. I want me some of that. And God said, all right, but it ain't going to turn out well for you. But he let them have their own way. And they suffered the consequences. Well, the people, they should have learned their lesson, but they didn't. So what God did, he caused the bad guys, the first one was called the Babylonians. And them Babylonians, they came in and they took over. They took over, first place they took over, see, remember, because the land was divided into two. We had Judah at the north and Israel at the south. And they was divided up and they were fighting against each other, couldn't even get along and stuff. So Judah came along and Babylon said, hey, we're going to take over. They came down and said, we're taking over this whole area right here. Okay? And they took it over and they became the rulers over Israel. Israel wasn't too happy about that. They should have listened to God. They should have listened to the prophets. So, they took over. That was 586 BC. Write that down. 586 BC. Exile. And they had a king, and he was not a nice guy. He did not worship God at all. And this king who came down from Babylon took over Judah. His name was, anybody know? Anybody know? Yeah. Nebuchadnezzar. That's right. Nebuchadnezzar. Nebi. We'll just call him Nebi. All right? Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar came and took over. And then he had himself an idea. His idea was this. He said, I'm going to take me some of the best young men in Israel, and I'm going to train them up. Train them up to serve me and to be my warriors. He took them, and he had them eating the best food. He had them on an exercise regime, probably something like yoga. And he had them training and eating all kind of delicious food. But there were some boys, 4, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel, and they said, we want to do it our way. We have a way that's good. Okay? And they said, let us do it our way. We'll eat the best foods, eat healthy. We'll exercise. And you can put us to the test and you'll see that we're better. And that's exactly what happened. So that's how we got introduced to Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and Daniel. Man, those were some men. Those weren't just boys. Those was men. Because they were smart in the head. And they took care of their body. And they grew strong and fast. And the people around, the leader, the king said, wow, he was paying attention to that. Yeah. Some of the benefits of following Yahweh, the good God, living rightly, making choices. Because of what? What did we learn about last time? What Nelson Zane told us about? I watched the video. Watch the video if you haven't seen it yet. It's good. Nelson Zane said you got to have wisdom, and these boys had wisdom. So, anyway, got to get you some of that. Daniel and his buds, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, even though they was living outside of the land, and it would have been easy for them to say, well, God let us down, forget him. I mean, he ain't going to watch out for us. We ain't going to watch out for him. We're doing our own thing. A lot of people did that, but not Daniel. Daniel said, we're going to live rightly because we believe God is going to restore what has been taken away. He's going to put an end to the exile and bring us back to the land. And Daniel actually was one of them there prophets. So we want to write that down. Nebuchadnezzar, Nebi, and Daniel. And his buds. Daniel and his buds. Now it talks about this a little bit at the end of 2 Chronicles. Now if you go and you read the book of 1 and 2 Chronicles, that's just a story of God's relationship with his people in the Old Testament. There's a lot there. It's good. I read it. And now there's big words in there, but I think you can do it. Just, do your best. So anyway, what I was saying was, Daniel, at the end of 2 Chronicles, it talks about God's people getting a punishment because they rejected God. Not because he's mean, but because he's faithful to his people. Okay? He does just like your parents. When you was running out into the front yard when there was a snake out there, and they knew it, slithering around under the house. And you went out there anyway, and then they got to punish you. Yep. Not because they're mean, but because they love you. They might have to exile you from the front yard just for a while till you learn your lesson. So, young men and women, learn your lesson. Follow God. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. And lean not on your own understanding, but in all your ways acknowledge Him. And He will keep your paths straight. That's what my mama taught me growing up. So, that was Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You remember the story of the fiery furnace where they had to bow down? Everybody had to bow down to the idol that King Nebuchadnezzar had made. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego said, we ain't going to do that. No way. Nope, not going to do it. It's against the law of God. We worship God alone. And the soldiers took them and threw them in the fiery furnace. And they looked in there, and what did they see? Not 3 men, but 4. God was in there with them. A lot of people believe that was Jesus. I think it probably was. We'll find out one day when we get to heaven. He protected them. He kept them safe. And they came out. And people began to pay attention. So sometimes God is faithful. He saves us. Now sometimes in the Old Testament, just like now, when we follow God, we suffer the consequences in this world. But we have the promise that in the life to come, when the exile is over, when we go back to the land, or to the land that God has called us, Canaan, heaven, that we will be with Him forever. There's going to be no more sorrow, no more crying, no more tears. All right, anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. Getting worked up now. You got me all worked up. You got me worked up. All right. So Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego is a reminder to us that God has not forsaken. And He gives Daniel a vision because Daniel is a prophet. Daniel is a prophet. And God gives him a vision for the future of Israel that one day He will return. If you go look at the prophets. Now, that's what I want to talk about a little bit because it's important that even when they were in exile, spread out across the land, and the bad guys, the Babylonians and the Syrians and the Persians, all of them came down and took over. And they were a little different, but, basically the same story because of God's unfaithfulness. God spread them out. They were spread out, taken out of the land, many of them. But God sent prophets to them to remind them of who He was, to remind them about the straight and narrow path, and to remind them this, that if they would humble themselves and pray and seek Him, that He would return them to their rightful place. How about that? So we got prophets like Daniel, and Daniel also spoke about the future, our future. But that's another story. Jeremiah was one of the most famous prophets. It's a big book in the Old Testament. Got a lot of interesting stuff in there. And God used Jeremiah to warn Judah. Hey, turn from your ways, Judah. Look back to God. Follow Him. And He will direct your paths. You will avoid destruction. But did the people listen? No, they didn't listen. God dang it. They didn't listen. They weren't going to listen. They never listened to those prophets. They thought they was a bunch of kooks. So they suffered the consequences. But even while they're in exile, the prophets still spoke the truth from God. They was given God's word, not their own words, coming from their own minds. They were speaking the words of God. Things God told them to say, told them to do. You got Jeremiah, you got Daniel, you got Ezekiel. Now, let me say a little something about Ezekiel. You ever read Ezekiel? Go read it. Matter of fact, go right now, read the first chapter. Put it on pause there. Go read the first chapter of Ezekiel and come back and just say, man, that's weird. That's some weird stuff, Brad. That's weird. It is weird, I'll admit it. And I'm not into that archy poetry stuff. I'm not. I mean, no offense. I know people are into that, and that's cool. Okay, I'm okay with that. But that's just not my thing, It's not my thing. But these prophets, they was into that. And it turns out, God's into that too. God uses poetry and art and drama, acting, to remind his people of who he is. So you got Ezekiel, and Ezekiel has this crazy dream. He has this crazy dream about, I don't even know, wheels and lights and faces and stuff like that. Just read it. And he has this dream, and it's a dream to remind God's people of his glory. He has a vision of God's glory. And some of these prophets, they do these dramas, right? These taking a pot and burying it out in a field. And one guy, he even took off all his clothes and went out, tied himself up in the middle of town. Said, this is what's going to happen to you. And he uses imagery of crazy things. Why? Because he wanted to get their attention. Is this God just being artsy? Well, maybe partly, but not that. No, that's not the point. The point is God is trying to get their attention. Just like when you go downtown and you look up in there and they got like a giant billboard with some crazy picture on it, right? They're trying to get your attention, trying to get you to buy something, right? Like the new fishing pole that just came out or something like that. Well, trying to get, that's what God's doing. And he'll use whatever he can to get their attention. Why? Because he loves them. He's faithful. Now, that's the apostle. That's the prophets, okay? And you got some good stuff in there. I encourage you to read some of it. Like Ezekiel 37:3 is about the valley of dry bones. Yeah, kind of a freaky story. And you got one prophet. What's his name? Ezekiel 16:1 through. Man, I'll tell you what. It's kind of PG-13, kind of a little bit. So I'd be careful. Maybe ask your parents if they're okay with you reading this. It's Ezekiel 16, verses 1 through 63. And it'll make you cry. It really will. It will make you cry. Now, you just read that. You think about it. All right? So, anyway. Then you got the book of Lamentations. The book of Lamentations is all about the sorrows of God's people. Okay? Because sometimes, here's the thing, it works. Exile works. It works. I remember when I was a kid, and my mom, whenever I done something bad, like the time I stole the tractor, and I drove it up to the school and used it to turn over the principal's car. I thought it was funny. She didn't think it was funny. Nobody thought it was funny. You know what they did? They exiled me to my room. Now, the first day I was like, this is kind of fun. You got to sit up there, read some books, and I got to do all kind of stuff. I don't even remember what it was. But I was by myself. Now, the second day I was like, now this ain't getting, this is kind of boring. I don't like this no more. So after day 3, I was miserable. I was sad. I wanted to be with my family. I want to be hanging out with my friends. So I got thinking maybe it wasn't such a good idea to take a tractor, mess with the principal's car. So I kind of felt bad about it. I had to think about it, you know. I had to say I was sorry. Well, that's what exile works like, to get our attention so that we'll come back. Lamentations is a book of God expressing their sorrow. And God, whenever they did that, whenever they humbled themselves and prayed, God would restore his people. That's right. But they would go right back to it again, over and over and over. It's like they never learned their lesson. It's like my dog Pinto. That dog never learned his lesson, man. All right, anyway. So that's the prophets, the pesky prophets. God sends them because he loves his people. He's faithful. And we got a lot of prophets there, man. I just encourage you. Yeah, just read through some of them, man. There's some crazy stuff. All right, anyway. Moving right along, we're going to go to another section of exile, and that's the Psalms, the book of Psalms. Now, it's kind of weird to put that in the book, in the exile period, isn't it? That is kind of weird. But here's why it's important. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why right now. How many of you guys out there how many of you guys are a fan of country music? Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, Isaac, I knew it. I knew it. Glory, I knew it. Yeah. Well, we all know country music makes us feel happy. Well, I know it's about sad stuff, right? But something about identifying. There's just somebody out there, right? There's just somebody out there who identifies with how I feel, right? They identify with what I'm going through, my sorrows, and it makes me feel good. Lifts me up, makes me feel like I'm not so alone. The other thing music does, not just country music, okay? There's other kind of musics out there, like Western. Anyway, music reminds us not here, but here, that we are not alone, that God is still with us, and He is still good. And that's what the book of Psalms does. While the people were in exile, God sent them music. And He sent them matter of fact, the biggest book in the Bible, you know what that is? Yeah, Judah. What do you think it is? Yeah, Psalms. You got it. The book of Psalms. That's the biggest book in the Bible. And that wasn't no accident. That was on purpose, because God knew His people needed music. We need music. And we especially need music that tells our hearts and our minds that He is in charge. And so they gave us the book of Psalms to sing. So now, you just hold on there, buddy. We'll be right in there. So He gave us the book of Psalms, and the book of Psalms does a couple things. First of all, it's about worship. That's what it's about. It's about worship. But it's not just about worship of our voices, it's worship of our hearts and all the emotions. See, some people, they don't like emotions, you know? They don't like emotions. They think emotions are scary, hard to control. But God invented emotions, and He wants us to use those emotions. He gave us emotion. Now, they're broken, don't get me wrong. Just like our minds are broken, our hearts are broken too, right? Just like we can think crazy thoughts, we can feel crazy feelings. And we got to be careful of that. Well, the Psalms helps us with that. But it doesn't mean the emotions are bad. Now, if we do bad things, that's doing bad things. Don't do bad things. But we might feel some bad things, and that's normal. Even David did it. He's one of the singer-songwriters that wrote all this stuff. He's even better than Willie Nelson. So, He gave us emotions that we can feel and express and sing. And there's some themes. I'm going to talk about some themes. Matter of fact, write these down. These are themes for the book of Psalms. And these are important themes. All right? One theme is lament. Everybody say lament. Write it down. Lament. Okay? Lament. Lament. And it means to be sad. Right? To feel bad. To feel bad and be sad. And some of the Psalms, especially Psalm 6, talks about feeling sad. Another and a major, very big theme is praise. So lament, and we got praise. So Psalm 6, go read that. And then we got praise. You can read Psalm 150. Just talks about rejoicing and happiness. All right? Let me shut the door. All kind of crazy stuff going out there. So Psalm 150 talks about that. Then we got imprecation. Imprecatory psalms. Imprecation. Anybody know what imprecation means? Imprecatory. Joyce, you know what that means? Yeah, very good. Yeah. It means you're in trouble and you're gonna get it. That's imprecatory. It's calling upon God's justice on evildoers. And it's some hard stuff in there, talking about taking their babies, smashing them against rocks. And, you know, it's kind of like, hey, you mess with God, you're going to get it. You better watch out. He's going to show up at your house in the middle of the night, and you're going to regret it. Don't mess with God. All right? Imprecatory says, hey, God, do your thing. Go do your thing. All right? A good one is Psalm 5 and Psalm 3. 5 and 3 imprecatory psalms. The next one is special occasions. All right? Special occasions. Okay, like weddings and when kings get inaugurated, ordained, or whatever it is, Special occasions. All right, so like 24 and 45. 24 and 45 special occasion psalms. All right. Then the last one, that's 4. The 5th one is royal. And I guess that's focused on kingly stuff, like God being king. And that's a lot of those psalms. You know what? All of them, matter of fact, all of them point, you know what they point to? They point to King Jesus. That's right. They point to King Jesus. Our king. Not just King David, but from his line, talked about last time, the one who sits on the throne forever. King David. And we got Psalm 2 is one, but there's lots of them. These are just some. I'm giving some ideas. Now the Psalms, again, were given in order to remind the people that God is in charge, that he loves them, that he's faithful, just like the prophets. But instead of it being humans, it's music. And think about this. This is what God does for us today, y'all. Isn't it true? Today, in our walk with God, it's hard. It's hard, I know. It's hard. There's temptations out there. There's hard things. It's hard to be a teenager, a young person. It was hard when I was a teenager. But it's probably harder on you guys, I know. But he's given us a couple things to get through. Couple training wheels kind of things. All right? He's given us prophets. Now, we don't have prophets like we had back then. It's different. But we have people that speak truth, that tell us, hey, watch out. Don't go that way. Listen to them. Okay? Choose wise ones. Parents sometimes are the best ones. Not always perfect. Your youth pastor. Your pastor Mark. All right? He ain't perfect, but, he ain't so bad. Anyway, so you got to find the prophets in your life, people that you can listen to, and listen to them. They're not just trying to boss you around. They want good for you. All right? Listen to them. The other way we got this, the Bible. Read it. I know it's got big words in it, but you're smart. Read it. The third thing, I think I said there was 2, but I'm adding one more because, music. Listen to it, but not, man, now here's the thing. Be careful what you listen to. There's a lot of junk out there. I know there's good music, and they've got this beat, and like, yeah, ooh, yeah, ooh, yeah. And it sounds good, but sometimes you got to be careful because it's saying stuff that ain't true. And if it goes in, it's going to come out. What goes in comes out. It's in your brain. It affects your heart. Got to be careful. Listen to some stuff that's talking about the truth. Okay? Listen to some Lauren Daigle. Lauren Daigle. She's good. Or some Dave Crowder. He's good. All right. Dave Crowder. All right. Or the Rusty Buckets. They're good. Listen to the Rusty Buckets. All right. Anyway, listen to music that talks about God's goodness. And sing it. Go to church. Sing your songs. Go to church. People, sing. You ain't so cool. You can't sing. Anyway, that's enough for today. Here's your assignment. Your assignment for today is to read a psalm, pick a psalm, any psalm, and illustrate it. Just draw a picture. I want it to look good. Post it. Okay? Email me. Whatever. I want a picture of a psalm that you created. Use art. Use drama. Write a poem. I don't care. Do some, or make a song out of it. Add a tune. All right? Pick a psalm. Illustrate it. Artsy like. Send it to me. All right. Peace. I'm out of here. Let's go.